Hi, welcome to Enter the Bunker, where we launch you into thriving. Each week we talk about a different virtue that can be used as a building brick to build your own personal bunkers. We share personal stories, as well as tips and tricks to help you thrive instead of survive. So sit down, relax, and enter the bunker.
Hello everybody and welcome to Enter the Bunker. This week's building brick, we're doing part 2 for optimistic. My name is Kelly.
And I'm Jonathan.
And we're going to get started into how to be more optimistic. So we have 4 things. We're going to go through each one and then we'll talk about each one separately. Number 1, try on a positive lens.
Yeah.
2, take note of the company you keep.
Always.
3, acknowledge the negative.
Sometimes.
And 4, acknowledge what you can and cannot control.
Always.
So number 1 was try on a positive lens. Pessimistic people have a tendency to think negatively, so flip the script. If you make an attempt to think in a positive sense, to reframe a situation, you'll begin to naturally see things in a more optimistic light. Practicing positive reframing will train your brain to automatically think that way. We kind of talked about this actually in the previous episode a little bit, but what are those steps that you first you got to figure it out and then do it and then, you said some steps in the previous episode that I want you to get more into.
So you don't really have to figure it out. You just got to make a decision.
Make the decision, yes, yeah. That's it.
So you start with the decision and then you practice it.
Yeah.
And if you practice it over the course of 30 days, that becomes a habit.
Right.
And then if you keep doing that for the next 90 days, then that becomes a behavior. Okay. The next thing you know, everyone's calling you optimistic.
Right.
Because you're actually seeing things through optimism all the time, and you're identifying things, and your life will change.
And if that becomes the behavior, you're going to do it without even realizing.
Exactly.
That's what
you're not thinking
is.
about it.
You're not thinking.
Instead of making decisions about it, you're just automatically doing it.
Yeah, I like that one. It's actually easier than people might think that's a hard task to do, but it's actually quite easy. The first month, I think, would be the hardest, and then you just get into it.
Yeah, that's right.
Number 2 is take note on the company you keep. Negativity is contagious. After spending a few hours in the company of negative people, even the most positive person will begin to see a change in the view to the negative. Luckily, positivity is also contagious. So limit your exposure to the chronically negative people and spend more time with positive, optimistic people, and you will notice the difference. So I kind of am going to take a little optimistic approach to this. I feel like this is kind of telling me to drop the negative people, but I don't necessarily. What if I take the optimistic approach and say, well, what if I notice this person's being really negative, so why don't I try to be positive? So say they're bringing the room down, but then my positivity comes in and it just trumps their negativity. Do you know what I mean? And then, yeah, so I'm taking an optimistic instead of just dropping them because I don't want them to be negative. Maybe they're sad or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the key word here though is chronic.
Right.
Like to be constantly negative about everything all the time.
Yeah.
They need to do a total reboot and go through these how-tos themselves and build that building brick for themselves.
Yeah.
But if it's sometimes every once in a while sort of thing, or certain situations, they tend to have this tendency to be more negative than positive and so forth, then yeah. And if you are strong enough, if you've built your building brick strong enough that you can sustain that and you can be able to have it so it doesn't impact you, then you can transfer that to them. And so then you can actually make it so that you are flipping the script on them, so that their negativity is now you're just going to inject it, and you're going to inject the positivity, and now you're going to make it to look optimistic.
Yeah.
So they may then over time start to you know how it is, as you get to know people.
Because what if you did that constantly with that
You do that
person?
all the time.
Yeah.
And then the person, before they're going to start catching themselves.
Yeah.
I'm going to say this, and then they're going to say that, and I'm going to know that. It's I should just be optimistic right away, right?
Right.
And then the next thing you know, instead of saying negative things to you, they're coming at you with just I bet you're going to say that this is something positive, right? And so then, so.
You made them have a behavior.
Yeah, you just changed their outlook.
Yeah.
And so that's one way you can do it, but you got to make sure that you've built your building brick strong. If you're somebody who's still struggling with keeping optimism in your own life, don't try that, right? Because that's just a way that's going to drown you out yourself in your own efforts.
And it will too.
So just getting started with your how-tos, it is a good idea to just choose who you spend your time with. Right?
Yeah.
So that's all there is.
Yep. I agree. Okay, number 3 is acknowledge the negative. Being optimistic does not mean you ignore the negative. You just don't dwell on it. Not acknowledging the negative can cause you to live in a dream world where that doesn't actually exist. Acknowledging things can be negative sometimes, but looking for how to make it better and positive is a realistic way of looking at your life. Realistic thinking will support your optimism with actionable things to create a positive outcome.
So the truth is that when you are so optimistic that you don't acknowledge that there's something negative, then that just makes you a dreamer, right? Like you just go into kind of a la la land kind of a mode, and you think that everything is just roses and there's nothing bad.
Right.
And that's where you will become ungrounded, and now you start to not be able to have things that you could actually take action with, right? So it's really about being able to have a balanced outlook and saying like, okay, yeah, there's these negative things and there's these positive things, but my optimism says this is where this is where I'm gonna look.
Right.
So it's important that you be able to do that, because then it gives you a chance to be able to like take action in a way that is optimistic,
right? Versus
rather than just dwelling on the negative. Because if you're dwelling on the negative, what that ends up doing is like you don't take action. You end up just not moving.
Or your actionable is going to bring you farther down the hill, not up the hill.
Think about somebody who's excited about starting a business.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
They'll start all like jazzed up about the dream. Oh, yeah, I'm going to be a business. I'm going to be my own business, right? And then we all crazy about it. And then they start to talk to somebody who actually knows something about it. It's like, well, did you think about this? Did you do a business plan? Do you have financing? How about this? Oh, by the way, did you get customers? What about this? How are you going to advertise it? And then all this stuff.
Oh my God.
And the next thing you know, he can perceive that as negative. And then he just sits grounded because he's just surrounded by that and doesn't move and doesn't take action.
Yeah.
Right? But if he was optimistic, he'd be like, well, those are things I got to learn because I'm so excited about doing this.
Make a list.
Boom. So then he starts to take, he's taking the negatives and he's taking the positive, but then he has something realistic to move towards. So what's he going to do? He's actually going to look at the financing, the business plan, the advertising, everything else that has to go to getting to that business that he's so excited about.
And in this example, he's going to learn that much along the way too.
Exactly.
Just all from being optimistic.
Exactly.
That's awesome. And number 4, acknowledge what you can and cannot control. Bad things do happen. It is inevitable.
Inevitable.
Sometimes it is because of choices and decisions you make. Other times it could have nothing to do with you. It is important to know the difference between what you can and cannot control. Accepting that not everything happens to you is within your control, can help you from getting down on yourself when something doesn't work out. The important thing is learn from those situations, take steps to mitigate the effects of negative things that will inevitably occur.
Inevitably.
That word's hard.
It is a hard word.
Okay, so acknowledging what you can and cannot control. Talk to me.
So there's the choices you make,
yeah,
right? That you can do that are actually what you have control of.
Right.
There's things that you don't have control of in the world, like the weather.
The weather, yes,
right?
definitely not.
So you can end up like having a rainy day, for example, right? So there might be a rainy day. How are you going to acknowledge that? And how are you going to recognize that like you just have no control over it? A lot of people, if it's a rainy day, what do? They get all negative. It's just like, oh, it's raining,
Or cancel their plans and stay home.
And all this kind of stuff. It's just like, but you have no control over that. No. So why wouldn't you so if you're going to be optimistic about it, it's just like, oh, it's raining. What can I do with this, right? And then you could be like, well, I'm just going to go out for a walk in the rain. Or
I'm going to go dance in the rain.
Yeah, you can have fun with it. Or you can make plans around it, that knowing that that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Don't allow it to be able to slow down your day. And then just recognize that, like, well, this is part of life and this is rain. And it's like, this is like April showers bring May flowers.
Yes.
So we're going to see like green, like
beautiful flowers.
Everything's going to be beautiful because of this. So there's ways to be able to look at this optimistically, but you need to be able to acknowledge like that there's things that are out of your control. You just are not going to be able to control the weather.
Yeah.
So
there's no way.
So why would you allow the weather to be able to control you?
Or stress you out or frustrate you or
So it's simply being able to acknowledge that there's things that you can't control, just be optimistic through them, and just accept that.
Yeah. I like that. That's actually good. That's opened up my brain a lot. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for part 2 of Optimism. We will see you next week. Our next week's building brick is determination.
Ooh.
I'm excited. All right. We'll talk to you then. Bye.
See you then.
Thank you for listening to Enter the Bunker. Make sure to follow us on Instagram where you can share your story and also look at behind the scenes of how we make our podcast. You can watch the video version of this podcast on YouTube by simply searching Enter the Bunker. Tune in next time as we launch into thriving.